I ran an attachment style quiz. 112 people took it, and the results were honest in a way data usually is. Not dramatic or clean, but quietly telling. So here's what we found, and more importantly, what it actually means. The breakdown looked like this. 37% of respondents were anxious, the largest group. 32% were fearful avoidant, also called disorganized. 22% were secure, and only 9% were avoidant. The first thing we're saying out loud, most people who took the quiz were not securely attached. That's not a judgment, it's just the reality. People trying to love while feeling fundamentally unsafe. Now, before we get into what the data means, I want to address something. There's a lot of content online that treats avoidance like they're the villain and anxious people like they're the victim. And I don't mean to tell people how to feel or dishonor their pain, but the truth is that the data tells a different story, and I believe a more honest story. If you measure raw deviation from secure attachment, anxious is actually further from secure than avoidant is. Anxious sits about 7.5 points above the secure average. Avoidant sits about 3.5 points below it. So mathematically, anxious attachment deviates more. But here's where it gets complicated, and this is important. Distance from secure matters less than direction. The anxious person moves towards others to manage fear. They overthink, they reach, they seek reassurance. But closeness for them is how they regulate. They're far from secure not because they don't want connection. They want it desperately, but they lose themselves in the pursuit of it. The avoidant person moves away from others to manage that same fear. They withdraw, they suppress, they mistake independence for safety. From the outside, they look regulated, but what they're actually doing is controlled attachment, and that's not the same thing as being okay. The avoidant scores closer to secure in the data, but that proximity is partly an illusion. They appear calm because they've gotten very good at not feeling the problem. That's not healing, that's containment. So here's the counterintuitive part. Even though the anxious patterns deviate further on paper, avoidant patterns can actually be harder to shift in practice. Because anxious people feel the problem constantly. The discomfort is loud. And that loudness, painful as it is, creates pressure toward change. Avoidant people avoid feeling the problem at all. The defense mechanism works too well. There's no urgency, no obvious moment where things break down. The stagnation is quiet, and the quiet stagnation is very hard to interrupt. Anxious, visible struggle. Avoidant, hidden stagnation. Neither is worse, but they call for completely different kinds of work. Now, the second largest group in our data was fearful avoidant at 32%, and this style doesn't get enough attention. This is the person who wants connection and fears it at the same time. They move toward you, then pull back, then move toward again, without a stable strategy. In Be a Good Little Ghost, I write about what happens when early attachment trauma creates what researchers call a horror without resolution. The child needs closeness from the very person who is the source of their fear. There's no safe option. So the nervous system learns to do both at once. That paradox doesn't disappear in adulthood. It just finds new people to replay itself with. Fearful avoidant isn't furthest from secure because it deviates the most in one direction. It's furthest because it can't find stability in either direction. The distance isn't measured in points, it's measured in coherence. Looking across all 112 responses, a few patterns kept showing up regardless of the style. Communication triggers insecurity across the board. When someone went quiet, changed their tone, or pulled back even slightly, people read it as a threat, not a reality, an interpretation. People don't trust their needs to be received, wanting support but struggling to ask for it, needing reassurance but fearing that they are too much. That's not a communication issue. That's an identity issue. When you don't believe your needs are acceptable, you either hide them or panic communicate them. Conflict is being survived, not processed. Very few responses showed repair-oriented behavior. Most described fear, withdrawal, emotional swings. Because behavior under pressure is almost always a coping mechanism, not a choice. And coping mechanisms don't heal anything, they just manage. The core fear across every style is abandonment. Anxious, avoidant, fearful, avoidant. All of them are orbiting the same wound. So instead of asking who is further from secure, here's the better question. Who is further from balance? Anxious is imbalanced toward others, extending themselves to maintain connection at the cost of losing themselves. Avoidant is imbalanced towards self, protecting themselves from connection at the cost of having it. Fearful avoidant oscillates between the two. Secure isn't some perfect middle ground. Secure is the place where both needs, closeness and autonomy, can exist without one threatening the other. It's being able to say, I need you without collapsing into it, and I need space without disappearing into it. Here is what each style actually needs. For the anxious person, the work isn't about loving less or needing less. It's about building the capacity to stay grounded regardless of what the other person does. The shift is from do they still want me to can I stay grounded regardless of their behavior? For the avoidant person, the work isn't becoming more open in some vague sense. It's about learning to tolerate closeness without it feeling like a loss of control. The shift is from this is too much to I can stay present without losing myself. For the fearful avoidant, the goal isn't to eliminate the oscillation right away. It's to slow it down enough to actually see it. The shift is from I don't know what I feel to I can stay with one response long enough to understand it. And here's the truth underneath all of this data. People are not broken. They are protective. Every style is an attempt to answer the same question. How do I stay safe and still be loved? Anxious answers by pulling close. Avoidant answers by keeping distance. Fearful avoidant answers by doing both, sometimes in the same conversation. None of these answers were wrong. They were all right once, usually in childhood when the options were limited and the stakes were real. The tragedy isn't that people develop these strategies. The tragedy is that most people carry them into adulthood without ever realizing the original threat is gone. And the protection, the thing that kept them safe, is now the problem. The safety you're chasing externally has to be built internally. That's the core of the ghost framework. And this data confirms it. You don't become securely attached by finding the right person. You become securely attached by building something inside yourself that doesn't collapse when someone pulls away and doesn't overwhelm when someone gets close. Now, that work is not fast. It's not linear. It doesn't look like a breakthrough. It looks like many small choices over time to stay instead of run, to feel instead of manage, to be honest instead of performing safety.